It is 9:05 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It is the 30th day of July, 2026. This is episode 1363 of Bitcoin, and you can't have it both ways. The United States has sanctioned Iranian maritime firm because it accepted Bitcoin. I get why. It's just it sends mixed messages. I mean, if Bitcoin is the most solid thing ever, according to President Donald Trump, to the point that he cuts an executive order to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve, yet we turn around and we sanction people for actually using the best money in the world. I think that kind of makes it seem that we lack credibility when it comes to our decision making around why Bitcoin is so cool that we have an executive order to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. That's going to be our lead story today, but we've got other fish to fry. We'll be talking about the GrapheneOS pushback on that duress password case. Also, not exactly sending a good message out there into the public as far as the United States is concerned. And then after that, crypto has come to arbitration. Not arbitrage, arbitration. Then that's going to be honestly, that may be just as big news as the whole sanctioning of the Iranian maritime company for using Bitcoin. We'll get into exactly why. And then the Fed keeps interest rates unchanged. That's going to be how we lead into running the numbers. Then in the second part of the show, Australia is getting in on the Telegram stuff. They're suing Telegram because, reasons. And then we got a little bit news of the Clarity Act. And then we're going to talk about Bitcoin's quantum plans. Bitcoin's quantum plan assumes some algorithms break, and AI has weakened one of these algorithms, and blah blah blah. But something else has happened, and most of you are probably never have ever heard about what I'm going to talk about during this section of the show. But I think it's important to understand a couple of things as to where all this AI stuff, not where it's going. All right. Nobody really knows exactly where it's going, except that it's definitely not going to die, but how it's changing the landscape of a lot of different things. And then we'll stay on with quantum attacks because, why not? That's in the news. It's FUD to combat. So we might as well know what FUD that is. But let's go back and start the top of the show here with U.S. sanctioning Iranian maritime firm because it accepted Bitcoin to evade restrictions. Ezra Reguera kicks it all off from Cointelegraph. The U.S. Treasury has sanctioned 2 Iranian maritime firms involved in an alleged Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps-backed insurance network, saying one of them accepted Bitcoin and the other digital assets to bypass Western sanctions. On Wednesday, the Treasury's Office of Foreign Asset Control said that Persian Gulf Marine Insurance Company and Hormuz Safe Marine Services Authority were integral to what it described as an IRGC-backed insurance network that required commercial vessels to buy approved coverage before transiting the Strait of Hormuz. The firms were designated as operating in Iran's financial sector, and the action comes after earlier reports that Iran was considering a Bitcoin-based maritime insurance platform. U.S. authorities now allege that the network generated revenue for the IRGC. Treasury also sanctioned 8 other companies linked to Iran's shadow fleet and identified 8 vessels as blocked property. The OFAC said Hormuz Safe accepted BTC and other crypto as part of efforts to evade sanctions. It alleged that the platform generated revenue on behalf of the IRGC while helping Iran exert greater control over shipping through the strait. Quote, the United States will not allow Iran to hold global commerce hostage, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, accusing the regime of using international shipping to finance the IRGC. On May the 18th, remember all the way back in May, screenshots of the Hormuz Safe website had circulated online offering digital insurance for maritime cargo with policies payable in Bitcoin. And at the time, reports suggested Iran was still considering the insurance-based model and the website was inaccessible when checked. No, not when I checked. It was available when I checked it back in May, but whatever. Iranian state-linked media Fars news agency said the proposed platform could issue marine insurance policies and certificates of financial responsibility while potentially generating over $10 billion in revenue. And, of course, the Strait of Hormuz does handle about 1/5 of the global oil trade, meaning efforts to monetize or control that traffic through the waterway carry fairly significant implications for international energy markets. Earlier reports, citing the Bitcoin Policy Institute, said Iran accepted oil toll payments in Chinese yuan, Tether, and Bitcoin, though there was no on-chain evidence that any Bitcoin payments had yet been made. Bitcoin may be attractive to sanctioned actors because it has no centralized issuer capable of freezing funds, etc., etc., etc. So at the time, and that's the end of the article, but at the time, mid-May, we were all jumping up and down going, oh my God, they're accepting Bitcoin for insurance. And it's like it's the best way that a state can, evade sanctions because, Bitcoin. And yes, it's not as if those reasons aren't absolutely 100% correct. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that at the time, a lot of people in the Bitcoin space were automatically assuming that they were taking Bitcoin for payment right then, not vetting whether it was a real deal or not trying to dig a little bit deeper and figure out, not only is this real, but has anybody actually paid Hormuz Safe in Bitcoin for maritime insurance policies? And I found zero evidence that anybody had actually paid. But here we are today, July 30th, just, a couple of months later. And OFAC is saying that they have. That's the message that I'm reading in this. They're not preventing it. They're saying that it has happened, that ships and shipping companies have indeed purchased insurance policies for safe travel through the Strait of Hormuz with Bitcoin from Hormuz Safe. That's the read that I'm getting. And that's pretty big. Because now, it's not like the government of Georgia did it, or Serbia, or, Turkey or something like that. No, the United States is still the financial powerhouse of the world. Don't know how long that'll last, but for right now, as of today, that is in fact the case. Nobody exerts more control over the financial structure of the world as the United States does. And U.S. Treasury can make a lot of countries' lives extremely miserable. And that institution, the U.S. Treasury, is telling us that yes, it has in fact occurred that Iran, not Iran, but other, some companies from other countries have in fact paid in Bitcoin for safe transit across the Strait of Hormuz. That's fucking huge. That's huge. It's not exactly a stamp of approval, but it's the best proof that we have that the Hormuz Safe product is a real product and that people have indeed actually paid in Bitcoin for that product. Now, the other side of that story is that they're getting sanctioned. That's the funny part of this story. Oh, so you're sanctioning Iran. Is that before or after you're dropping 2,000-pound bombs everywhere? It seems, to me, it just seems like overkill to sanction, to put sanctions on Iranian companies or the IRGC when you're actively in kinetic warfare with them. So that's kind of like the funny part. But the biggest news is that Secretary Bessent has basically said, yes, this is happening. Bitcoin is being used as currency right now to get across the Strait of Hormuz. I find that fascinating. I find the next one full of shit. Actually, the story is true, but this is not good. Completely legal. GrapheneOS pushes back as duress password case proceeds. This is from Stephen Graves writing for Decrypt. Privacy software firm GrapheneOS has said its smartphone operating system is completely legal and constitutionally protected as the first U.S. prosecution involving one of its features moves through the courts. Quote, "We have no obligation to weaken any of the security protections it provides," the project tweeted July 27th, adding that laws requiring it to do so would be, in fact, unconstitutional. The statement came in a thread about the prosecution after a user asked whether the project was refusing to cooperate with Homeland Security. GrapheneOS said that it could not. Once key material is wiped, quote, "there's nothing we can do to assist with it," it wrote, and bypassing encryption is, quote, "not possible by design." Samuel Tunick, an Atlanta activist, is charged under 18 U.S.C. 2232 after allegedly entering what's known as a duress code that wiped his Google Pixel during a warrantless border search in January of 2025. He has pleaded not guilty and faces up to 5 years in federal prison. Let's say that again. He faces up to 5 years in federal prison for wiping his phone at a border crossing. A judge is expected to rule on his motion to suppress no earlier than the end of October. Tunick told 404 Media the case is aimed at deterring others. "The charges are meant to intimidate people against protecting their data," he said, and the government hopes to set a precedent that no one has the right to privacy. He described a year of surveillance before the indictment, including a tracker on his car and subpoenas for his phone records and Gmail account. His federal public defender, Matthew Dodge, said DHS officers called ahead to the airport and asked that Tunick be stopped and his phone searched. Agents searched his bags and person over his objections and found nothing. Dodge said, they could have sought a warrant, but they didn't. Quote, "They didn't do that," he said. I keep wanting to say Doge and it's tripping me up. Dodge found one other prosecution under the same statute in a drug trafficking investigation, calling the charge extraordinarily rare. A CBP spokesperson told 404 Media that all travelers are subject to inspection and that searches of electronic devices are rare and decided on a case-by-case basis, taking account of travel history and law enforcement alerts. The U.S. Attorney's Office declined to comment. GrapheneOS added the duress pin in June 2024 for exactly the scenario Tunick describes, with its founder, Daniel McKay, pointing to a published overview of the system's defenses against data extraction, and in a tweet, it said that the secure element of the Google Pixel phone recommended by GrapheneOS firmware updates only after the owner authenticates as a defense against state coercion. It's a Fifth Amendment violation. The government is not allowed to have the right to search your papers and property and you without a warrant signed by a judge. And I would assume that the judge, that's where it kind of falls apart for me. At the federal level, the Fifth Amendment protects you against that kind of shit. At the state level, not so sure, but it doesn't matter because in this case, this is a federal case. It was federal agents that did this. He is in court at the federal capacity. He's completely protected by the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of the United States. This shit cannot stand. But that said, let's back up a little bit and talk about friction. One day, as a child, and when I mean child, I mean like below, like somewhere between the ages of 16 and 18, I was talking to my dad about something, and I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was something stupid like, if a cop ever stopped me, I would do X, Y, and Z. And it was, something that you would think a kid would say. Probably like I would tell him to go fuck off, or I would tell the cop to pound sand and he can whatever. And Dad just looks at me and he said, "You really want that kind of friction?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, yeah, I mean, what you say is true. You could say that, but it's not going to do you any good. And it's going to get you in trouble, even whether you believe it should get you in trouble or whether you believe that you shouldn't be in trouble for saying that, it will. And if you want to be stupid about it, go right ahead. Otherwise, my suggestion is to do the following. What you say to an officer is yes, sir, and no, sir. You answer yes and no questions by saying yes, sir, and no, sir. You don't volunteer any information, but you basically kind of do what they say. And when that happens, generally speaking, when you're saying yes, sir, no, sir, like something like a traffic stop or whatever, generally speaking, you lessen the friction. You don't cause a pain point for either yourself or the people that are involved that could cause you even more pain. That's what I'm getting at here. Now, that doesn't mean like if a cop says, "Hey, take my gun and point it at this dude and shoot him," and then you say, "Yes, sir," because that's not what my father was trying to say. He's saying that 99% of the cases that you see or that you get involved with the police, if you're just a normal human being going about normal business and you're not doing stupid shit like breaking into somebody's house, but just like the cop says, "What are you doing here?" I don't have to tell you that. And then the cop says, "Can you leave the area because we're searching for somebody?" Okay, fine. On that one, you can say yes, sir. If you don't care about what's going on, then leave. It's that easy. You just cause zero friction for yourself. If you want to be a dick about it and get up in the cop's face, you're going to end up having problems. I'm not saying that it's right, and I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just stating facts. In the case of the duress pin, it seems to me that if especially this particular activist, knew he was being tracked, he found a tracker on his car, right? He's had like basic searches of his Gmail requested. He apparently knew before this incident occurred. It seems clear that he knew that he was being watched. And it seems to me that he was that in this particular case, right or wrong, it doesn't matter, right or wrong. And in this case, he was right to use the duress pin and wipe his phone. Why didn't he do that before he even entered the airport? I think it was to basically spit in their face. And fine, I get the sentiment. I'm not even saying the sentiment is wrong. I'm saying, how much friction did he cause for himself? He's in court at the federal level. Sometimes, some of us make honest mistakes and get into friction points. But when you when you just basically do it and you're self-inflicting it, that you don't, if you make a mistake, chances are good you didn't know you were making the mistake. You weren't setting out to make the mistake. It was an accident. In this particular case, he knew he was being watched. He knew he was about to travel. He knows he's got to cross a border. And I assume that was going into like the customs area for international travel or whatever. I don't know exactly what happened. They talk about he was crossing a border, and it was at an airport, so I assume he was going on an international flight. And there's when you're going on an international flight, there's a section of the airport. Once you cross it, even though it's in the United States, it's technically outside of the United States. They have to have that for international travelers coming into the United States so that they can go to customs, so they can present their passport. They do all this stuff. But there has to be an offloading place for them to still be technically international citizens while they're on U.S. soil. That's the way this shit works. And he basically just rubbed it in their face. Again, I think he was right to do so, but I think he could have done this before he even entered the airport. Better yet, if you know that you're being watched, if you found a freaking tracker on your car one day, and you know that you're an activist of like some kind of political thing where you're anti this or pro that, and it's like basically kind of gotten you in trouble before, here's what you do. Back up your phone to like I don't know, one of these days, something like Start9 or like a home server that you can tunnel into will be able to hold, your phone's backup, and you can do it from anywhere. Back up your phone. I would, you can use Apple Cloud or whatever if you want, but if you want to keep all your data to yourself, then use a home server and set it up to where you can back up your phone to your private server from anywhere, right? Start9 kind of lets you do that, and there's some other companies that kind of let you do that, but you got to have some technical chops. And then after you've backed up your phone, factory reset it. Means all the pictures are gone, all your contacts are gone, everything, like all the apps that you downloaded are gone. It comes to you like the factory reset literally does what it says. It resets your phone back to the factory when you got it, which means that it had maybe 4 or 5 apps preloaded on it, and that's it. No contacts, no notes, no nothing. And then you hand them the phone, and they can look at it however they want to look at it. You give them the passcode if you set a passcode. And just let them do it. There's nothing there. You reduce friction, and you go on your merry way, and when you get to where you're going, install the backup, and all your shit's back. And then when you go home, do the same damn thing. Do not give these people any reason to cause you problems. This guy is going to, he's being defended at the public level, so he doesn't have to pay for it. But what's the quality of his lawyer? I don't know. Could be good, I guess. But if you want to be have a surefire lawyer, it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more. If it is unnecessary, if all you're doing is proving a point, figure out how much that point costs, and then figure out if you're willing to pay it. Okay, moving on. U.S. arbitration giant launches specialist panel for crypto disputes. This is out of Cointelegraph, Ezra Reguera writing. The American Arbitration Association, one of the world's largest providers of private dispute resolution services, has launched a specialist panel for blockchain and digital asset cases, giving companies access to arbitration with expertise in the technical and legal complexities of crypto disputes. On Wednesday, the AAA said that its new Web3 panel brings together arbitrators with experience across law, technology, academia, litigation, and digital asset businesses. The panel is designed to address disputes arising from increasingly automated and decentralized commercial systems, including disagreements over contract interpretation, governance, asset control, cybersecurity, transaction records, and cross-border enforcement. The move signals that mainstream legal institutions are building specialist infrastructure to handle the increasingly complex disputes emerging as blockchain and automated transactions enter commercial use. Quote, Web3 disputes involve familiar commercial questions, but in a highly technical environment, said Eric Dill, AAA Senior Vice President and Head of Panel Relations. Initial members include lawyers specializing in digital asset and technology disputes, University of Pennsylvania law professor David Hoffman and Rich Widman, Google Cloud's Global 3 of Web3 strategy. The panel also covers disputes involving agentic commerce and autonomous transactions where software and artificial intelligence systems may initiate or execute agreements with limited human involvement. The panel does not give the AAA any regulatory authority over the crypto industry. Arbitration generally requires the parties involved to agree to submit their dispute to a private arbitrator. That's the end of the article. This is bigger news than many people think because arbitration is heavily used in corporate and business world to resolve potential breaches of contracts and things like that. Like if I have and even outside of like, you know, small businesses, just between two individuals, you got a contract. Hey, I'm going to provide this and you're going to provide that. But we need in that contract, you know, some people write in an arbitration clause that says if for whatever reason, the two parties aforementioned in this contract come to a dispute over anything, we both agree to private arbitration. That's actually not a bad clause to have. Because if you both pre-agree to having arbitration in the contract, the second that a contract dispute comes up, nobody can take you to court if like the other person is the one saying, hey, you violated the terms of the contract, you're in breach. That person cannot take you to court. They have to do arbitration first because they agreed to it. And generally speaking, if you go to arbitration and you sit down with a third party that doesn't know either one of you and listens to the facts, reads the contract, is very astute as to what the hell's going on, generally speaking, the two parties, without any lawyers involved, without any courts involved, can come to an agreement on how to resolve the issue. The fact that the largest arbitration company in the United States is front running this whole, they're at this point, they are front running because they're already talking about providing arbitration services to agentic transactions like AI payments with Bitcoin over the interwebs. And these guys are already stacking the deck to say, we need to provide an arbitration service if something goes wrong. Honestly, I think this is just as big news as the Hormuz safe thing. But neither one of those stories is as tasty as Kid Warp's chocolate vanilla paste. Yes, you can get chocolate vanilla paste from Kid Warp's Vanilla Shop. I will give you the link. It's in the show notes. It's already there. I've already typed up the show notes because the URL to his storefront is a little long, and I don't want to say it here. But it's Kid Warp's Vanilla Shop. Kid Warp, you can find him on Nostr. Just use any Nostr client, type in Kid Warp in the search bar, and you'll probably find him. You can get chocolate vanilla paste. Oh my God. I haven't tasted this one, but vanilla paste is something that's very dear to my heart. Why would you use it? You just use it anywhere that you would use vanilla extract, except it's just a vanilla flavor bomb because it's basically vanilla bean. It's not vanilla beans that have been soaked in alcohol and the alcohol taken off and used as a flavoring agent. No, this is just macerated vanilla beans. And in this case, chocolate and vanilla beans. They source premium quality organic Madagascar vanilla beans and vanilla beans from other countries from all over the world to show off the different flavor of vanilla. We use old time traditional vanilla extraction processes and not modern quick brew methods. No corners are cut in our small batch production. Go and get some vanilla paste. Use it wherever the hell you were going to use like vanilla extract. And you use it 1-to-1, right? So if you use a teaspoon of vanilla extract, you can use a teaspoon of vanilla paste to accomplish the same thing. You'd use it in cookies, any of your baking goods, like if you're going to use it to make a like whipped cream, it would put like if you're making whipped cream and you use vanilla extract, you really don't see it. You use this stuff and that whipped cream will have these little tiny black flecks all the way through it. So not only are you getting the flavor from vanilla bean in your whipped cream, you're getting like some visual interest in vanilla in your whipped cream. Go to Kid Warp's Vanilla Shop. Kid Warp's Vanilla Shop. The URL directly to a storefront will be in the show notes. Otherwise, search for him on Nostr, Kid Warp. And I think he actually has an extra account or an extra identity for Kid Warp's Vanilla Shop. I'm not sure, but make damn sure that you use Bitcoin and as the coupon code. You will get 10% off at Kid Warp's Vanilla Shop. All right, last up for this half. Bitcoin barely budges as the Fed keeps interest rates unchanged. This is Matthew DeSalvo writing for Bitcoin Magazine. Bitcoin was trading higher on Wednesday, but only slightly, after the Federal Reserve decided to keep interest rates still. The leading cryptocurrency was recently priced at close to $64,402 per coin after moving up by nearly 1% in the hour following the announcement. As expected, the U.S. Central Bank did indeed leave the federal funds rate in the 3.5 to 3.75 range, but 3 of the 12 members of the policy-setting Federal Open Market Committee preferred a 0.25% hike at this particular meeting. Speaking to the press following the announcement, Kevin Warsh, the Fed chair, revealed little about what the central bank might do next. Quote, "The Fed is on the case. I've been heartened by the reception I've received, and we're committed as ever to deliver." End quote. Not saying much there. He added that the July rate decision was a rigorous review of the economic situation. Quote, "I wouldn't characterize what we did as anything like a pause. I would characterize what we did as a rigorous review of the economic situation. I would characterize what we did as a review of the big, hard questions." Big and hard. Watch that language in public there, pal. Warsh, who took over in May, has said he has no tolerance for inflation that has been running above the central bank's target for more than 5 years. Okay, I got to pause. We've never hit the 2% inflation target that the Fed has set. Ever. People keep saying that. I have yet for anybody to actually send me a scrap of evidence that suggests that we've ever hit 2% inflation. It's always been over 2% inflation. So I honestly don't know what he's talking about. But continuing, Bitcoin has typically performed well in a low interest rate environment, and crypto investors have been hoping the Federal Reserve would cut rates to boost digital assets. President Trump, since taking office, has pushed for lower interest rates himself. He even clashed with ex-Fed Chair Jerome Powell over the matter, if you remember. And for now, Warsh doesn't seem like he'll be going in that direction as sticky inflation continues to bother Americans. The Federal Reserve started aggressively raising rates in 2022 in a bid to control 40-year high inflation spurred by the COVID-19 pandemic. Bitcoin was hit by the tightening. But then in 2024, the central bank repeatedly cut rates, and it has been hesitant to lower them since the end of 2025. Now, there's a couple of things about these years here. 2022 and 2025 also happen to be sort of like red letter years for private credit. You've been hearing a lot about private credit. So let me just say this. Here's what private credit is. It is things like like an investment company, like let's just take BlackRock, and they will take investors' money and they will invest it for a return on the customer's investment. But during that time, they will use the liquid capital in those funds to make loans to corporations and businesses and sometimes even private individuals. It's not a bank that did it. If I went to Wells Fargo and got a loan, that is not a private credit, right? That is commercial. A private credit loan is completely different. And private credit has had problems with their investors, the people that gave them the money to do all the stuff that these companies do in the first place, want a lot of their money back. And a lot of that happened in 2022, like was, the Federal Reserve started aggressively raising rates in 2022. At that same time, one of the effects of that, Fed raising the rates was that those investors were like going to these private credit firms and saying, I want my money back. And those private credit firms, both in 2022 and in 2024, kind of said, we'll give you some back, but we're only responsible under the contract you signed as an investor in this private credit firm. We're only going to give you back like 5%. But investors like in 2022 and 2024 or 2025 want 10% back. Or 2020 and 2022, this started happening. But in 2025, the private credit situation got way worse. And I've been looking at this, and I have found no evidence that investors wanting their money, their principal cash returned to them, and whatever, gains that they may have made. There's never been a time that more investors have gone to private credit houses saying they want their money back than at the end of 2025. 2020 was bad. 2022 was bad, but nothing like 2025. And before 2020, it's not that it's unheard of. It's just, it's never been an issue. It started being an issue in 2020 and 2022, but it's gotten really bad in 2025. That's where we're at. And that's what private credit is. Let's run the numbers. CNBC futures and commodities, Brent North Sea oil down 1.5% to 89.33. West Texas Intermediate down 0.8% to 83.71. Natural gas is a hedge today, which means that things are calm enough that as oil goes down, natural gas traders can use it as a hedge, right? Because there's it's not like, oh, we've got an agreement on the table and everything goes down. Or, oh my God, we're just doing nothing but bombing the living snot out of everybody, so everything is in the green. When natural gas is in the reverse position of crude oil, that tells me that right now the traders are looking at the news and there's nothing that's lighting them on fire. Let's just say it that way. But natural gas is up 1.8%. Gasoline is down 2.5 to $3.31 a gallon. Murban crude is down 1/3 to $87.70. Metals are all in the green and smoking hot today. Palladium up 4.3%. Gold up 1.8 to 4,112 3 dimes. Platinum is up 3.7. Silver itself is up 1.6 back to 59.04. Copper is up 2.6%. Ag is fully mixed today. The biggest winner is rough rice, 1.9% to the upside. The biggest loser is lumber, down 1 1/3. Live cattle is up 0.86, but lean hogs is down 3%. Feeder cattle up 0.4. The indices are liking what they're seeing today. S&P is up 1 1/4. The NASDAQ is up almost 3 points. The Dow is up 0.8%, and the S&P Mini is up 1/3. And then there's Bitcoin, which is holding its own. $64,730 isn't bad considering what we've been through. That's a $1.3 trillion market cap, and we can get 15.7 ounces of our favorite shiny metal rock with our one Bitcoin, of which there are 20,063,151.14 of. Average fees per block are low, 0.02 Bitcoin taken in fees on a per block basis. There's about, again, 45 blocks carrying 85,000 unconfirmed transactions waiting to clear at high priority rates of 2 sats per VByte. Low priorities will get you in at 0.8. Hash rate has risen slightly. We were about 30 minutes ago at 900. We are now at 897 exahashes per second, and I'm fine with that. A reminder that if you want to support this show with fiat currency, go to bitcoinandshow.com. That's the Bitcoin and podcast website, bitcoinandshow, all one word.com. You can sign up for $5 a month. You can sign up for $50 a year, or you can get a free tier. And what you get out of it is all the same across the board. It is merely a mechanism for you to use fiat currency to support the show if you so choose. If you want to use Bitcoin, you can go and use fountain.fm. Fountain.fm is the way that you're going to get one of the best podcasting 2.0 apps out there. This what I use as my daily podcast player. It's my daily driver. I love the thing. And you can send me boostograms, which is a note that has some certain amount of Satoshis attached. All the podcast apps that are 2.0 enabled already have the ability to let you use Bitcoin. Most of them, actually, I think all of them in this particular case, use the Lightning Network. So if you already have a Lightning wallet, you can use that. You can use the internal wallets. You can use all kinds of stuff, but you can send me great, big, massive amounts of Bitcoin by going and using something like Fountain app. And here's a couple of the boosts that I got to demonstrate how this works. A couple of people listened to Constitutional Crisis, which was yesterday's episode of Bitcoin, and Progressively Worse sent me a boostogram using Podcasting 2.0. He sent me 16,000 Satoshis. That's a lot. And I appreciate every single Satoshi from Progressively Worse. And he also sent a note. And the note reads thusly: Cathedral deserves more love. Oh, thanks, man. The amount of time and effort you've put into constructing the whole system, let alone explaining it as you go, is beyond measure. If I had to sum it up into a single word, it would be exquisite. Keep it up, Mr. B. I always look forward to, and it cuts off because sometimes Fountain app cuts off my boostograms, which at one point or another, they'll get their heads around it, I promise. But moving on, Jason High with 500 says, I didn't listen to the Cathedral episode, though I'm sure it was very interesting. Here's double what I normally give. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it. Nick Dose with 250 says, cheers. Noster Gang says, I'm a lady, LOL. This is the second time Noster Gang has had to remind me, not a dude, a ma'am, a lady. She's a girl. Okay, I Noster Gang, I apologize. I don't know why I keep reverting to everybody's a dude. I don't know if it's because it's Noster or what. I mean, even your avatar clearly shows you kind of purplish and pink with like rosy cheeks, and I'm, for whatever reason, I don't know, I'm just retarded. Oshi says, without the circular economy, what the hell are we even doing? I appreciate that, Oshi, because that's a good question. But this is the way these people support the show. They use a Podcasting 2.0 enabled podcast player. They listen to the show, and either before, after, or during listening to the show, they write me a note and they attach a certain amount of Satoshis to it. That's their Satoshis. It's their money, and they give it to me. And this is the way that they show their support. And I love every single one of them and all the Satoshis that they rain down upon me. That's the weather report. Welcome to part 2 of the news that you can use, where Australia sues Telegram over alleged failures to remove terrorist content. Ah, the terrorism. Helen Parts writing this one for Cointelegraph. Telegram, the messaging platform used by more than 1 billion people worldwide, is facing a major legal challenge in Australia over claims that it failed to stop the spread of terrorism-linked material. Australia's online safety regulator, the E-Safety Commissioner, launched civil penalty proceedings against Telegram in federal court on Thursday, according to an official statement. The authority alleged Telegram breached its obligations under the country's Online Safety Act to address pro-terror content by failing to act on multiple user complaints. The case adds to growing global scrutiny of Telegram's moderation practices following legal pressure on CEO Pavel Durov in Russia, which I told you about yesterday, and France, as governments increasingly examine how major online platforms handle harmful content. E-Safety, in its year-long investigation, found that Telegram failed to remove certain unlawful material after becoming aware of it, with some reported content remaining visible for up to 3 weeks. The regulator also alleged that Telegram did not take sufficient steps to prevent repeated violations, including removing accounts, channels, and groups used to distribute, pro-terrorist material. According to eSafety, Telegram also failed to detect known extremist content, including footage from the 2019 Christchurch mosque shootings and the 2022 Buffalo mass shooting, before the material was later removed. Well, the regulator is seeking financial penalties, with violations of Australia's online safety rules carrying potential fines of up to 54.6 million Australian dollars. It's about $35 million US. Telegram has not issued an official statement, but its official X account posted a video captioned, quote, "freedom of expression." Telegram did not immediately respond to Cointelegraph's request for comments on the story either. And then they talk about Russia's legal pressure on Durov. It doesn't matter because I told you about all that yesterday. If you didn't listen to yesterday's show, you're missing out on what the hell's going on with Bitcoin, which is why I do the show that I do. Okay. It's very clear that Russia is not considered the West, but it is a major power player on the world scene, and they're putting pressure on Pavel Durov, the CEO of Telegram. Australia and France are definitely Western countries, and they're fairly powerful, and they are also putting pressure on Telegram. They don't like this. And I'm pausing here to collect my thoughts a little bit. I don't know how to say it other than this. I got a bad feeling about this. It's not just about Telegram. I got a bad feeling coming. The thing with the dude getting facing up to 5 years in prison because he used a duress code on GrapheneOS on a Pixel phone. Pavel Durov wanting to be arrested by the authorities in Russia and fined $54 million in Australia, and France getting in on the action. That's two completely separate issues. India trying to shut down BitChat on GitHub, which doesn't matter because now you can actually send the whole application of GitHub from one phone to another, which I think is amazing. So, for instance, like let's say that I'm an Indian citizen and I'm over in India and I'm a student and I've taken part of those protests, and let's say, and I've never figured out if India was able to successfully get BitHub or BitChat removed from GitHub, at least in the confines of the country of India. Let's say that they did, for shits and giggles. Now you're like half the students have BitChat and they can communicate with each other because they can't pull it off their phone, let's say, and the other half didn't get it in time and now they can't get it. And they don't know where else to go get it because BitChat was placed in a whole bunch of other little repositories that were available in India. But let's say you didn't know how to get it. I walk up to my friend and I say, I'm sad. I don't have BitChat. I can't help, like coordinate activities here in this protest. And my friend looks at me and says, I'll give you BitChat. I can get you the entire application right now over the phone. So a BitChat user that has the application on their phone can give another person on their phone the application. The phone itself acts as the BitChat repository. And the code, the application, the executables, everything goes over to the phone in a package that is just a one tap. You start up you get the application from your friend, and it appears on your phone, and you tap it, and you've got BitChat. I've never seen that done with any other application before, whether it pisses governments off or not. I've never seen this done before, and it makes me happy. But the whole issue that I'm getting at is that India is trying to shut down BitChat. Something, and we've known something bad is brewing in the background, but I just got I got a bad feeling that we might see exactly the extent to that bad shit soon. I don't know. I mean, I don't have some kind of, information that you're not privy to. Don't think that I'm holding a secret. It's just a gut feeling. But it seems like a huge acceleration all of a sudden of some of the worst behavior by governments all over the planet. And I think it's because they want to shut down the ability for their citizenry, whether they're Russian, American, French, Australian, to basically, I don't know how to say it, other than break in and overthrow the government, their respective governments, through violent means that nobody wants to see, including me. I don't want to see it. But I don't know if there's any escape from it, and I think that that's what's going on here. I don't think governments are doing this because they want to not tell people the truth. I think that truth is going to come out one way or another. And I don't think that the governments are sitting there saying, when this truth does come out, people are going to be upset. I think that they're worried that people are going to be way beyond upset. And that's why we're seeing the kinds of shit that we're seeing over the last couple of years. And remember, if you're under the age of 26, then you don't know what happened on 9/11. You weren't there. You may know what happened on 9/11/2001, but you weren't there. You weren't in the aftermath. You weren't completely laden with daily narratives of what the hell was going on, during 9/11 for the year following. Because that environment is important to be steeped in to truly understand what happened in a world event. Yeah, I know World War II happened, but I wasn't alive to go to the movie theaters and see the newsreels. I wasn't reading the newspapers. I wasn't getting the parallel narrative of what the hell was going on in World War II. I know World War II simply as what's written in the history books. And of course, now I'm questioning everything, but that's aside. That's beside the point. Ever since 2001, this shit has just been on an escalatory curve, for lack of a better term. It just gets steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper in the amount of bullshit that we're having to put up with, and I'm fucking tired of it. And I think that that's what the problem is. That they know that I'm tired of it, and they know that 8 billion people definitely also tired of it. And 8 billion people up against, a handful of millions of people that would be the quote unquote government faction of the world, don't stand a chance to get against that many pissed off people. You can say, oh, well, they'll drone them. Dude, think of the numbers. 8 billion versus, I'll be very conservative and say 150 million government employees around the world, from presidents and prime ministers all the way down to teleprompter operators. 150 million. Okay, I'll give you 200 million. Look at the number differential between 8 billion people and 200 million. I don't care what tech you got. Unless you got a fucking particle beam that can wipe out 6.7 billion people in a couple of seconds, you don't stand a chance. And this is an unforced error. This is self-inflicted bullshit. It's just like the governments did it to themselves. I'm not calling for violence. I'm not calling for a revolution. I'm calling balls and strikes. People are tired, man. And I doubt that the Clarity Act is going to make us feel all, warm and fuzzy. Even if a Democratic senator is backing the Clarity Act with proposed law enforcement changes included. And they're not the law enforcement changes that you want, by the way. Matthew DeSalvo, Bitcoin Magazine. Bipartisan work on the long-awaited Clarity Act continues after Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto said that she, along with 2 law enforcement groups, are, quote, feeling good about proposed changes to the bill. Along with the National Association of Assistant U.S. Attorneys and the National District Attorneys Association, Cortez backed changes to the bill and said that they felt positive about the chance to resolve this issue once and for all, according to Politico. The changes were sent to the White House. A number of lawmakers are hoping the Clarity Act, which would set in stone certain crypto regulations in the United States, gets passed before Congress departs for August recess. But, some sticking points remain, particularly with the Democrats. According to the news report, the changes proposed by the law enforcement groups refer to a small section of the bill which seeks to protect some crypto software developers and firms from being prosecuted for illicit activity committed by others on platforms that they create. A new version of the Clarity Act has been circulating amongst lawmakers since last week. It has changes regarding ethics and bans officials from their families from issuing or promoting crypto, something lawmakers previously had issues with. The Clarity Act was passed last year by the House of Representatives, but has remained in deadlock in 2026 while regulators and banking chiefs hash out a new version of the bill. The banking lobby raised concerns over stablecoins. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah. The real point here, and I'm not going to finish this, because we're almost to the end and it's just rehashing shit we already know. It's the law enforcement. They feel good, right? This is a Democratic senator, Catherine Cortez Masto, and they feel good about this bill because these changes in law enforcement, what exactly are they talking about? How is it changing? It says, according to the news report, the changes proposed by law enforcement groups it just refers to a small section of the bill which seeks to protect some crypto software developers and firms from being prosecuted for illicit activity committed by others on platforms that they create. Okay, what direction are you going? We know what you're looking at, but you're not saying what these changes are. Turns out, Grok may be able to help here because somebody asked about this directly to Grok on, of course, X, and Grok's answer is thus. Take it with a grain of salt because it is AI, and we're about to get into the AI section of the show, and I want you to understand something. AI writing something and researching something is not the same as a human. It doesn't mean that humans can't lie or get shit wrong. It's just that I trust humans a little bit more than I trust Grok. Okay? So, grain of salt here. However, I tend to agree that this is probably the direction. Grok says this about the Clarity Act and this whole issue of that the Democrats and law enforcement feel good. This is why. The issue is Section 604 of the Clarity Act. It creates safe harbors so non-controlling software developers and non-custodial platforms are not treated as money transmitters under BSA AML rules. Law enforcement groups argue this creates gaps that hinder tracing illicit funds and prosecuting crypto-related crimes. Prosecutor associations proposed revised language backed by Cortez Masto, to close those gaps while preserving developer protections. Well, you can't really close those gaps without basically putting the developers in harm's way. That's why they're happy about it. So whatever language has been sent back to the White House for the Clarity Act is not good for the developers. Grok says it's, hey, they want to close the gaps while preserving developer protections. Impossible. It's just not possible. They should not even be, this section 604 should basically say developers, as long as they're not handling the money themselves, and that would include a mixer that is publicly available code, that anybody can spin up a mixer with the same code. That's the kind of shit that I'm talking about. The developers cannot be prosecuted. That's all 604 basically has to say. So I'm worried about this. But I'm worried about something else too. Along with what I was saying about, 9/11 and 2001 and this acceleration of everything, I got this. And at first, you're probably not going to understand why the hell I'm even talking about it, but I think it's very important to cover. This is out of InsideHigherEd.com. I'm just going to read the first paragraph. That's all we need. The National Council of Teachers and English Executive Committee voted on last Friday, to dissolve the Conference on College Composition and Communication. This association is called the 4 C's, also called just the C's. They want to absorb its approximately 2,500 members into the broader college section of the council. The C's members learned about the plan on social media on Thursday morning and spent the following 24 hours rallying against the decision. They argue it will severely weaken composition instruction in higher ed. Okay. My wife has her PhD in technical communication and rhetoric. She has gone at least twice to the C's conference. It's the largest conference for higher education, rhetoric, and communications. It's about writing. It's about being able to get an idea and take it out of your brain matter and put it onto paper or onto a screen through either a pen, a pencil, or tapping on keys. It was the largest conference in the world for it. It's 74 years old and it's gone. They're citing that it's like they have monetary problems, but here's what I think is happening. Because Harvard, a couple of days ago, announced that it was doing away with its writing center altogether. What do you think? So we've got rhetoric and communications and college composition thing closing down. We got Harvard stripping out their writing center. Can you guess? There's 2 letters. I'll give you a guess on 2 letters as to what the hell's going on, as to why anybody would do this. You're right. Artificial intelligence. Why should we learn to write when we can get Grok to write for us? That's what's going on. This is the single largest threat. And I know you're going to laugh at me, but this is the single largest threat to humanity that we've ever seen. Why? Because when you think about something and you are unable to communicate about that thing, then it's contained. It doesn't have any capacity to infect anyone else. I'm giving you a pause so that you can let that sink in. If you have an idea, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a business idea, or you could have a completely structured argument as to why government destroying money around the world is not good for humanity, and maybe we should fight against it with things like Bitcoin. The white paper of Bitcoin was written down by somebody who knew how to write. And it's not just that. The very act of writing, it has been proven over and over and over and over again, in a way makes you smarter. The act of writing helps you understand information better. When you take notes in class about a subject that you're studying, that's why note-taking works. If you just sit there blank staring at a biology professor, you're going to retain 1/100th of what you would if you were to write it down. It's being eviscerated right before our eyes. The reasoning is that, well, AI can just write for you. Well, why would I take the time to write? It actually kind of hurts my head when all I have to really do is get with AI. It doesn't mean, I'm not saying, that using AI in any kind of writing capacity at all is bad. I mean, using it to kind of like help you edit or help you like refine an idea, not a bad way to go. But to just say, hey, write me a essay about Napoleon campaign against Russia that winter. I can't even remember the year, whatever year that was that Napoleon went to Russia, and AI will do it. It's a shitty essay, I guarantee that. It's nothing I want to read, but it'll do it. So why write? And if you're not going to write, if AI is going to do everything for you, you don't need writing centers at college campuses to, teach people how to get their ideas out on paper or out on the screen or something. You don't need a conference to talk about how do we form ideas and how do we better write those ideas down. We don't need that shit either. AI is just going to do everything for us. This is bad. Because what if those ideas are something, like I said, something like the Bitcoin white paper or the idea behind Bitcoin? How Bitcoin came to be wasn't because of the white paper. The idea formed in somebody's head or some other people, along with like maybe some other people. We don't know if it was a single individual that created it or not, but you had to be able to get the idea down, not just in the form of code, but be able to communicate what Bitcoin was. I can give you code and not tell you a damn thing about it. It's going to be a very confusing time for you. But if I give you a white paper on what it is that I just handed you that describes the idea in the written form, well, all of a sudden things change. You know what to expect. How would you like it if you opened a position at your company and I applied for it without a CV or without a resume and without a cover letter, without a reading list, without references, without anything? You don't know fuck all about me, and I just say, I want to apply for the job. Hire me. Without anything. That's where we're headed. That's where we're headed. Let's do this one. Bitcoin's quantum plan, speaking of AI, assumes some algorithm breaks, and artificial intelligence just weakened one of those inside of 60 hours. CoinDesk, and it's written by Shara Malwa. AI heavyweight Anthropic said earlier this week that Claude Mythos preview model had discovered an attack that effectively cuts in half the key strength of Hawk, a proposed replacement for the digital signatures that protect online banking and web payments. The work took about 60 hours and roughly $100,000 in compute costs against an algorithm that had survived 2 years and 2 rounds of expert human review. Digital signature schemes such as Hawk prove that a message or data sent or set came. I'll do that again. Digital signature schema such as Hawk prove that a message or data set came from whoever holds a particular digital key that points to that exact message. And Bitcoin uses one every time a coin moves, and so does every website showing a padlock in the browser. The versions in use today for the web are expected to fail to quantum computers, and Hawk is one of the candidates under review to replace them. It has not been publicly deployed anywhere. Noting, or rather, nothing in the research affects Bitcoin or Ether currently, as both secure transactions with elliptic curve signatures, which neither attack had targeted. Hawk is not one of those schemes that Bitcoin would migrate to. So that's all we really need to know, is that websites and web payments that use encryption are looking at a structure and have been looking at a structure for 2 years, by the way. Hawk has been under review by human eyeballs for 2 years, and none of them caught a major issue, but it did cost $100,000 and 60 hours of compute time for Mythos to find it. This is one of the things that I don't mind AI being used for. Code review. I mean, and before AI, you know what they used to use for code review? 2 things. They used human eyeballs that were connected to people that knew how to code to look for problems. But second, and less importantly, but still important, was something called a fuzzer, where it would just continuously input all kinds of shit into the system, like it was pretending it was like you would get the code, you would get it into an executable environment, you'd run the code, and then code, generally speaking, needs inputs. Like, hey, I can do shit, but you know, either give me numbers, or give me letters, or give me words, or whatever it is. You know, give me input, give me data. And a fuzzer basically just goes through all kinds of ways to fuzz the input system to make sure that the code won't accept bad data. Between those two, those were the tools that we had, essentially. And now we've got AI. And I don't mind people using AI for code review. It actually makes a lot of sense to have as many eyeballs, especially on code that needs to be secure, as possible. So I don't mind that. I just don't like the thought of, and I don't even mind AI writing as a writing partner or as somebody to, review writing, whatever. But for the love of God, if you've got an idea in your head, you've got to learn how to write. And if you cannot write, and this is what I fear is that without the C's, without higher education communication classes and rhetoric classes and even English composition classes, and that's going to filter down through high school. If we don't learn how, like if our children's and children's children don't know how to write, how much farther is reading behind? Are we literally looking at the possibility of going backwards in literacy? Is that what we want? No. Here, code review, I'm good with it. Having AI help you write, I'm okay. But closing down the C's and Harvard getting rid of their writing center, gentlemen and ladies, it does not bode well. But last up for the day, there's a new way to protect Bitcoin from future quantum attacks, according to researchers. And I thought we'd end it today on this one because we're just coming out of this Hawk thing. So from Decrypt, and it's written by Jason Nelson, we have this one. Researchers at American Fortress, a Wyoming-based blockchain security and cryptography company focused on post-quantum security and digital asset infrastructure, have proposed a cryptographic system they say could allow Bitcoin and other blockchain wallets to withstand future quantum attacks without changing existing wallet addresses. Ooh, that would be nice. In a paper titled ZKPOSP, Post-Quantum Zero-Knowledge Proofs for Hierarchical Deterministic Wallets, American Fortress researchers describe replacing traditional elliptic curve signatures with zero-knowledge proofs while maintaining compatibility with hierarchical deterministic wallets, or HD wallets, which is what most of us have when we get a modern hardware wallet. Quote, recent advances in quantum hardware, including Google's Willow processor, have substantially narrowed the timeline to cryptographically relevant quantum computers, they wrote. And it also, further quote, in the blockchain setting where addresses and key derivation standards such as BIP32, BIP44, and SLIP10 are the dominant infrastructure for wallet management, a quantum computer running Shor's algorithm can recover any elliptic curve private key from the corresponding public key, threatening every wallet in production today. The research focuses on Q-Day. That's the point at which a quantum computer could, use Shor's algorithm to derive private keys from the public keys. But rather than requiring users to migrate funds to new quantum safe addresses, the proposed system replaces digital signatures with zero-knowledge proofs that verify ownership of a wallet's seed phrase. Because the seed itself remains a secret, the authors argue legitimate owners could still prove control of their wallets even if individual private keys are compromised. All right, we'll end it there, because what I want to say about this is a couple of things. One, why does it matter? Just move your funds. When you get a quantum secure wallet, you'll just take your funds from your one wallet address and you'll just send it to the new quantum safe wallet address. What's the problem? Why do we need zero knowledge proofs in our old wallet addresses? What if you're in a coma? Or what if you're alive and you've somehow or another you've misplaced how to reconstruct your HD wallet? I have my wallet is an HD wallet. My wallet was constructed using Cold Card, right? It's an HD wallet. What if I lost my seed phrase and my wallet addresses and my private key, which I don't have to have my seed phrase to reconstruct my wallet. If I know my private key, dude, I'm golden. I'm not going to memorize it, but maybe I've written it down. Huh? Well, what if I lost all that information because I didn't take Bitcoin seriously when I bought 250 of them in 2011, which I didn't. I wish I had, but I didn't. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is, let's say that all of a sudden, during that period that I've lost it, and quantum computers hit, and I can't move my funds because I don't have my private key on me. I'm still looking for it, whatever. And somebody is able to crack my wallet open with a quantum computer before I can move it to a quantum safe address. That's why. That's exactly why this is not a bad idea. It would be really nice to have this in the back pocket as an option, like a plan B, because there's still going to be quantum safe wallets, and they are going to use a different address structure. And you'll have to, and you will have the option to move your funds from like a P2P address or whatever it is, like a Taproot address, over to a quantum safe address. But if this were to come to pass, A, you wouldn't have to. And B, if for whatever reason, quantum computing did break all, like Satoshi's coins. Like let's look at the issue of Satoshi's coins. He's got like basically 1 million Bitcoin, and they've never moved. And we know that they're associated with his name because of early days in Bitcoin. I won't say more. It's just a bunch of detail stuff. They've never moved. With the ZK stuff securing it, then it's possible that it would still be safe, I guess. I mean, I think that means that this would probably require a hard fork, because it would replace the elliptic curve stuff. But but if this all happened before Q Day in quantum computers, it wouldn't matter, because once quantum computers got born that could be able to hack it, they would never be able to break through, because we're not using elliptic curve anymore. We're using a completely different structure, but we've retained the actual private key and wallet address and stuff. It's like, I'm sure there's a lot that I'm missing there, but it would make sense that if you were a man in a coma and you weren't able to get your stuff off and into a quantum resistant wallet without this ZK stuff coming along the way, you might wake up to an empty wallet. Whereas maybe you wouldn't coming out of the coma with the ZK stuff. I'm not certain. And I know that people like really associate ZK stuff with Zcash. Zero knowledge is just mathematics that have been around for a long time. They just happen to be used in the formation of the Zcash cryptocurrency. It was not developed by the Zcash guys. As far as I know, it was already existent mathematics, and they just applied it, and they called the damn thing Zcash. I'm not a proponent of Zcash. As far as I'm concerned, Zcash, Monero, and all that stuff is a shitcoin. Although I will say this, Of all the shit coins, I don't have as much of a problem with Monero and Zcash as I do with the rest of it. And the reason is simply because of this. Both of those projects were basically saying we already see a problem with some of the ways that Bitcoin functions, and we want to fix that. And they weren't really able to be listened to by the core developers of Bitcoin, and they don't listen to a lot of stuff, and that's fine. I understand it. So they developed these two things, but they came at it without trying to sell you a shitcoin. There were people that were proponents of both Monero and Zcash, like Roger Ver, who were trying, basically to say, buy Monero, buy Monero, buy Monero. The original developers of Monero and Zcash, they weren't like that. They were just saying, we're just going to use a different math. I think Monero uses something called ring signatures. Zcash uses ZK proofs and stuff, or zero knowledge proofs. And, but they weren't like Charles Hoskins from Cardano. They weren't doing it that way. They were doing it in a way that didn't feel greasy and grimy to me. I'm still not buying Monero and Zcash. I'm not, and I'm not going to tell anybody that they should go do it. I'm just saying that if push came to shove and gun to head, somebody says, if you had to buy any shitcoin ever, what would you do? I'd say, well, it'd either be something like between Zcash and Monero, but nothing else. But at least I'd have a way to keep them from shooting me in the head. All right, that's the end of today's episode. I do hope that you got something out of it. Please understand that being able to write something down, because you know how to at least spell mostly and have some degree of penmanship to make it legible so that other people can read it. Please understand that that is an important skill and always has been. It is half of being literate. If you can only read but not write, you are only half literate. And there's no such thing as being able to write without being able to read. There's nobody that can write sensible sentences with letters in whatever language that they happen to be writing on without first being able to read. That's why you learn how to read before you write. But it takes both of those to be literate, and we're about to lose it, at least in the West. I don't know what they're doing in China. But this brings me to a point about China and AI, and this will be the last thing that I say. You know how it's kind of been proven that China is behind a whole bunch of bot networks that are on social media that are agitating anti-AI folks to protest against the builds of AI data centers around the United States. I started thinking about this from a different perspective, because most people are saying, see, they want to stop AI development so that China can lead the way and they can have all the data centers. I'm not really seeing that much construction of data centers in China like I'm seeing in the United States, not to the degree. Now, I may be wrong, and if so, my premise falls apart. But here's what I think. They want to, the narrative in the Western media is that China wants to slow us down in AI development and data center construction. So they're putting these narratives out to spin everybody up, to go to their city councils and basically protest against the building of AI data centers. Okay. Is it because that they want to be able to have time to build their own data centers and they're finding it difficult to do that? I don't think so. Remember, was it Moonshot? Well, actually, I don't know if it was Moonshot from China or it was some AI. I reported on it last week, right? They distilled, they used a distillation process to train their own AI. I want to say it was Kimi K3. I think it was Kimi K3. And the accusation is that Moonshot, I think, is behind Kimi. They used the distillation process to essentially interrogate an American frontier model, and that's why Kimi 3 is so good and so fast. If that's the case, they kind of didn't need the data center. So Why do they care? Why do they care if the United States is ahead of them in data center builds for AI for training when they've maybe have a very clear and cheap pathway to be able to train their own models and let us take all the burden of the AI centers? Why on earth would they actually drum up opposition to that? What if by drumming up opposition, it forces it, or doesn't force, it causes the people that want the data centers because they're like, it's a bubble, they want to invest, they want to do it. What if it makes them even stronger in their convictions to build more? There's a 27 megawatt data center that is being planned to be built on the northeast side of Lubbock, Texas, which is right now my favorite city in the world. And if you've ever lived there, you'd be going, why? Because it's out in the middle of West Texas and it's hot. I don't know. I love it. I want to be back. I want to go back to Texas, and I love Lubbock, and for whatever reason. Anyway, 27 megawatts. Where's the power going to come from? But moreover, where's the water going to come from? The Ogallala Aquifer, which is already in the midst of being depleted. And the Ogallala Aquifer is the largest aquifer in the United States. It stretches from the south end of North Dakota all the way down to the panhandle of Texas, and it feeds almost the entirety of farming operations in the Midwest. And it's already under duress, for lack of a better term, and has been for a very long time. The level keeps dropping. We're farming way too much. What if China's actual goal is to get us to burn ourselves out in water, in electricity, capital expenditure, investment? What if by ginning up all the opposition, they've actually gotten their true goal to have the opposite occur, to have more development in AI, to use more of our natural resources, to put real strain on our already strained power grid? You could kill us from outside the United States without firing a fucking shot. You know who used to say that? Ronald Reagan in the 80s. The United States essentially militarily outspent Russia. And that's what caused the Soviet Union to collapse, because they kept trying to keep up with us, to build the same number of carriers and aircraft and bombs and bullets and all the shit that goes on in war, and they could not keep up, and it financially bankrupted the Soviet Union, and then the wall fell. I think that was 1987, maybe 89, I can't remember exactly, but the Berlin Wall fell, and that was essentially the symbolic collapse of the Soviet Union, and now we've got the Russian Federation. Reagan said of that, we destroyed the Soviet Union and we didn't fire a shot. Now think about how much AI infrastructure and data centers and what it takes. And here's what I'm not doing. I'm not actually calling anything like this is wrong or building data centers is wrong or building data centers is right. I'm just stating facts. They do take water, although I don't think that turns the water brown, because I don't think that they're injecting that water back into the drinking system. That technically would be against every health guideline for every state and at the federal level that's ever been written about public water systems. It doesn't work that way. So the brown water that, AOC keeps showing you, that's bullshit. But what's not bullshit is that it does use water, and if they're using water in evaporative cooling tower situations, that water is evaporated and cannot return. The only way this would work is if it was a closed loop evaporative cooling system where the condensate is collected and condensed back into water and put back into the system. That would be much better than what we're doing now, because generally speaking, water-based evaporative cooling systems don't do that. And the water is basically sent into the atmosphere. So in a way, it still uses water, and that water does not come back. I don't even have to worry about natural resources. If you're like, you're a hippie, you love trees. I get it. So let's talk about the electricity grid. Our electricity grid is already strained. And our financial situation, we've got so much debt in the United States, it's not even funny. Private credit has never seen this kind of demand to get the principal pulled back out of them to go back to the original investors, because their original investors don't know what the fuck to do, but they don't want it in these institutions because they see the same shit everybody else sees, including China. This shit is way, 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 way overbought. There's too much debt. And they're going to produce more debt, because as long as we can keep ginning up that AI capital expenditure machine over there in the United States, they will tax their water, they will tax their electricity, they will tax the rest of their financial system, they will increase their debt, and they will cause more fear in the United States citizenry than anything we could do by dropping a bomb. I don't know this for a fact, and it's not even really a gut feeling yet, but it is a theory that doesn't actually step all that far outside of the boundaries of what has happened in the world before. If you have not read Sun Tzu's Art of War, I highly recommend that you do. There's a reason people read this book. So if you're a person that rolled your eyes the minute I said read Art of War, I cannot help you. It doesn't mean that it's going to answer all of life's questions, but you should probably find out why people recommend reading Sun Tzu's Art of War. One of my favorite lines in that whole book is this: wait by the river long enough, and the bodies of your enemies will soon float by. We'll see you on the other side. This has been Bitcoin and I'm your host, David Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again real soon. Have a great day.